Chosen one. This message will reach you exactly when you need it most. Ethan sat alone in his dimly lit apartment, the rain tapping softly against the window. His life felt like it had reached a dead end. His career was collapsing, his relationships falling apart, and his hope fading faster than the night outside. Then, in the middle of the silence, his phone buzzed. An unknown number had sent a message. Chosen one. This message will reach you exactly when you need it most. His heart froze. Who had sent it? And why now, when he felt completely broken? The message continued to glow faintly on the screen. Go to the old library on West Street. The answer you seek waits there. Ethan stared at it, frozen. For a long moment, the rain tapping against his window was the only sound. His first instinct was to laugh, to dismiss it as some elaborate prank. Who even used phrases like the answer you seek anymore? It felt like the setup to a cheap mystery novel. And yet he didn't laugh. Something in those words stirred inside him. A whisper, a pull, not of fear, but of recognition, like the universe itself had leaned close and spoken directly into his ear. He set the phone down, running his hand through his hair. "This is insane," he muttered. But the silence of the apartment answered back, heavy and expectant. Finally, with a resigned sigh, Ethan reached for his coat. The weight of it felt heavier than usual, as though it carried more than just fabric. It carried choice. He slipped it on, grabbed his umbrella, and pushed the door open. The city greeted him with cold rain, falling in steady sheets that blurred the streetlights into glowing halos. Water streamed down the gutters, rippling with distorted reflections of passing cars. Ethan pulled his collar up against the chill and began walking. Every step echoed strangely in his mind, as if the night itself was aware of him, guiding him forward. He thought of the library, abandoned for years, ever since the new one opened across town. Children used to whisper that it was haunted. He hadn't thought about it in ages. Why there? He wondered. Why now? A taxi sped past, splashing water onto the sidewalk. He didn't flinch. His eyes were locked on the direction of West Street, as if his body already knew where it was going before his mind did. The rain grew heavier, drumming against his umbrella. He quickened his pace, his heart beating faster, not with fear, but with anticipation. The strange certainty inside him only deepened with each step. By the time he turned onto West Street, the world seemed quieter, lonelier. The neon signs of diners and shops gave way to darkened buildings, forgotten corners of the city where time moved differently. And there it was. The old library stood at the end of the block, its stone facade streaked with years of weather, its tall windows dark and watchful. The great wooden doors loomed beneath a cracked archway, as though daring him to enter. Ethan stopped at the edge of the steps, his breath visible in the cold air. He gripped the railing, hesitating. A sane man would turn back. A sane man would laugh at the absurdity of chasing cryptic messages through the rain. But Ethan was no longer sure sanity was the point. Something waited for him in there. He could feel it. Taking a deep breath, he stepped up toward the doors. The great wooden doors groaned open, their hinges crying out as though they hadn't been moved in years. A breath of stale air rushed past Ethan, carrying the scent of dust, parchment, and the faintest trace of candle wax. He stepped inside. The silence of the library was overwhelming, broken only by the soft drip of water echoing from somewhere deep within. Rows of towering shelves stretched into the shadows, their books cloaked in layers of dust, their spines faded and unreadable. Once this place must have been alive with voices, footsteps, laughter. Now it was a tomb of knowledge, abandoned but not forgotten. At the center of the vast hall, beneath the dim light of a cracked skylight, sat a solitary figure. A woman, draped in a gray cloak that seemed to ripple with shadows. Her hands rested calmly on the arm of an ancient wooden chair, her presence commanding yet gentle. Her face was lined, but not with the cruelty of age, rather with the weight of wisdom carried far beyond her years. Her eyes found Ethan immediately, and in them he saw something that made his breath catch. They were old, older than the building, older than reason itself. Yet they radiated kindness, like the warmth of a fire on a cold night. "You came," she said softly. Her voice was not loud, but it carried easily across the silence, as though the library itself carried her words. It was the voice of someone who had been waiting, not for hours or days, but for lifetimes. Ethan froze, unsure whether to step forward or flee. His heart hammered in his chest. "What is this?" he managed, his voice trembling. "Who are you?" The woman smiled faintly, as if his confusion was expected. "I'm just the keeper," she replied. Her words lingered, steady and certain. "But you," she lifted a hand, her eyes never leaving his. "You are the one chosen to carry the message forward." Ethan shook his head, stepping back instinctively. "Chosen? No, this doesn't make sense. I am nobody. I'm just—" His voice faltered because even as he spoke, something deep inside him whispered otherwise. The woman rose slowly from her chair, the folds of her cloak falling like ripples of mist around her. She moved with a quiet grace, her footsteps soundless on the ancient stone floor. "Do you think it is chance that brought you here on this night? That the words you received found you, and no other?" "I don't even know who sent them," Ethan said, frustration edging into his fear. "Why me? Why not someone else?" Her eyes softened, and for the briefest moment, Ethan thought he saw sadness flicker within them. "Because not everyone hears the call, but you did." The words struck him like a chord, resonating deep within his chest. She extended her hand toward him, palm up. Dust motes floated in the thin beam of moonlight above, swirling between them like tiny stars. "Come closer, Ethan," she urged. "The answers you seek are here. But understand this. Once you choose to step forward, your life will no longer belong only to you." The silence stretched, heavy with meaning. Ethan swallowed hard, staring at her hand, at the ancient shelves surrounding him, at the shadows that seemed to lean in, listening. A part of him wanted to run, but another part, stronger, steadier, pulled him forward. Slowly, almost against his own will, he stepped toward her. The woman's hand trembled slightly as she drew something from within her cloak. It was a simple envelope, yellowed with age, its edges frayed, its seal a hardened circle of dark red wax pressed with an unfamiliar crest. She held it out to Ethan as if it weighed more than stone. "This," she said softly, "is the message you were meant to carry." Ethan stared at it, his palms suddenly clammy. His heart pounded as he reached forward, his fingertips brushing the rough parchment. A strange energy seemed to hum within the paper, as though the words inside were alive, waiting to be spoken. He broke the seal and pulled the letter free. Inside, there was only a single sentence written in elegant, flowing ink. "When the world forgets its light, you will remind them of hope." Ethan's brow furrowed. He read it again and again. The words felt heavy, far too grand for him to comprehend. A bitter laugh escaped his lips before he could stop it. "Hope?" he whispered, his voice cracking in a vast, empty hall. "I can't even fix my own life." The woman's gaze did not falter. She stepped closer, her eyes shining like embers in the dim light. "It is always the broken who carry the brightest light." Ethan shook his head, retreating a step. "No, you got the wrong person. I'm not some hero, I'm not." His voice caught, old memories pressing in. The failures, the mistakes, the weight of everything he couldn't change. "I'm not enough." Her cloak brushed the dusty floor as she moved nearer, closing the distance he tried to create. "Do you think those who came before you were perfect? That they had no scars, no fears, no doubts?" "No, Ethan. They were shattered in ways the world never saw. And yet, it was through their fractures that light poured out." He clenched the letter in his fist, his knuckles whitening. The words burned in his mind, refusing to fade. "When the world forgets its light, you will remind them of hope." "But how?" His voice was almost a plea. "What am I supposed to do with this? Hope doesn't pay the bills. Hope doesn't fix the world. It doesn't." The woman raised her hand, silencing him with nothing more than a look. "Hope does more than you realize. It endures when nothing else can. It rebuilds when all has fallen. It breathes life where death has reigned. And you, whether you believe it or not, are meant to be its vessel. The library seemed to grow colder around them, the shadows stretching as if the very building leaned closer to hear. Somewhere above, thunder rolled faintly, shaking the old windows. Ethan's chest rose and fell sharply. He wanted to run, to throw the letter away, to return to the safety of the ordinary. But some unseen force kept him rooted. He looked back down at the words. Simple, impossible, terrifying. The woman's voice softened, no longer commanding but almost tender. Do not mistake your brokenness for weakness, Ethan. It is the cracks in the lantern that allow the light to shine through. For a moment, silence stretched between them. And in that silence, Ethan felt something stir inside him. Not certainty, not yet, but the faintest flicker. A spark. The days that followed were unlike anything Ethan had experienced before. Life still moved with its usual rhythm. The hum of traffic, the chatter of voices on sidewalks, the endless cycle of work, rest, and bills piling up on his kitchen counter. But beneath that ordinary surface, something had shifted. He had changed. It wasn't sudden, like a thunderclap or a revelation. It was subtle at first, like a whisper carried on the wind. Yet the more he paid attention, the louder it became. He began noticing people in ways he hadn't before. A man on the corner near his apartment, sitting on the cold pavement with a cardboard sign resting limply in his lap. Hungry. Anything helps. Ethan had walked past him countless times, never sparing more than a glance. But now, when their eyes met, Ethan saw more than worn clothes and tired features. He saw despair, a hollow absence of hope. For reasons he couldn't explain, Ethan stopped. Hey, he said awkwardly, crouching down beside the man. His voice felt clumsy in the rain-damp air. You eaten today? The man shook his head, not bothering to speak. His eyes were dull, as if he'd long stopped expecting kindness. Ethan hesitated, then pulled out his wallet. He didn't have much. His own bank account was dangerously close to empty, but he found a few bills and pressed them into the man's hand. More than that, he added words, soft and uncertain but honest. It's not much, but you matter. Don't forget that. The man blinked, his lips parting in a faint, almost disbelieving smile. God bless you, he murmured. As Ethan walked away, the words from the letter echoed in his mind. When the world forgets its light, you will remind them of hope. He had never thought of himself as someone capable of offering hope. Yet as he glanced back and saw the man holding his food with trembling gratitude, Ethan felt something inside him lighten. A small warmth spread in his chest, fragile but real. The next day, it happened again. At the grocery store, a young mother stood at the checkout, her little girl clutching her hand. The conveyor belt held only a few essentials: bread, milk, a packet of rice. As the cashier announced the total, the mother's face fell. She checked her wallet, counted bills, then whispered, "Take the milk off. Just the bread and rice." The little girl's eyes widened, confusion mixing with disappointment. Ethan stood behind them in line. He could have looked away, could have pretended not to notice. But something stronger than hesitation urged him forward. I'll cover it, he said suddenly, before he could second-guess himself. The mother turned, startled. No, that's not. Please, Ethan interrupted gently. Let me. For a moment she searched his face, as though trying to understand why a stranger would care. Her resistance softened. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "Thank you." The little girl hugged the milk to her chest like it was a treasure. Ethan swiped his card, ignoring the quiet voice in his head, reminding him of his own overdue bills. Somehow, in that moment, it didn't matter. What mattered was the look in the girl's eyes, a spark of joy that had nearly been extinguished. And again, he felt it, that same lightness, that same strange sense that he was doing exactly what he had been meant to do. At work, too, the pattern continued. Ethan sat at his desk one late evening, papers piled high, the office nearly empty. From across the room, he noticed his colleague, Sarah, staring blankly at her computer screen. She rubbed her eyes repeatedly, her shoulders trembling. "Hey," Ethan said softly as he approached. "You okay?" Sarah startled, quickly wiping at her face. "Yeah, fine." just tired. But the quiver in her voice betrayed her. Ethan sat down in the chair beside her. He didn't press her with questions, didn't demand answers. He simply waited, offering silence as an invitation. Slowly, Sarah's composure cracked. "It's my dad," she whispered at last. "He's in the hospital again. They don't know if he's going to make it." Her voice broke, tears spilling over. "And I can't do this anymore. I feel like I'm falling apart." Ethan's chest ached with the weight of her words. He could have offered cliches, the kind of empty comfort people often used when they didn't know what else to say. But instead, something deeper rose to his lips, words he didn't know he had until they came out. "You're not alone in this," he said gently. "It's okay to fall apart sometimes. You don't have to carry all of it by yourself." Sarah stared at him, her tears slowing. "Ow, how do you always know what to say?" Ethan gave a small, almost bewildered smile. "I don't. I just know what I would need to hear if I were you." Her shoulders eased just slightly, and though her pain didn't vanish, she breathed a little easier. That was enough. Each encounter left Ethan changed. He would return home at night, exhausted but strangely alive. He sat in his dim apartment, staring at the letter he now carried in his wallet, its ink etched into his mind. When the world forgets its light, you will remind them of hope. He thought about the homeless man's smile, the little girl clutching her milk, Sarah's shaky laugh after her tears. None of these moments were world-changing. They didn't end wars, or solve hunger, or erase pain. And yet, each one mattered. Each one was a reminder that even in small acts, hope lived. But alongside this newfound lightness, there was also fear. What if he wasn't enough? What if this fragile spark inside him burned out? He lay awake at night, wrestling with doubts, the weight of the prophecy pressing heavily on his chest. Was he really the one meant to carry such a message, or had the woman in the library made a mistake? One night he dreamed. He stood once more in the library, the woman in the gray, cloaked before him. Her eyes burned with that same impossible kindness. She reached out her hand, but this time the library around them was collapsing, bookshelves crumbling, dust choking the air, shadows devouring the light. "Do not falter, Ethan," she said, her voice urgent. "Faith is not the absence of doubt. It is the choice to move forward despite it." He woke with those words ringing in his ears, his sheets damp with sweat. The next morning, as sunlight broke through his blinds, Ethan rose with a new clarity. He was not perfect, and he might never fully understand the prophecy. But perhaps that wasn't the point. Perhaps the point was simply this: to keep choosing light, no matter how small the flame, in a world that had forgotten it. Each time he remembered the message, each time he felt lighter, and somewhere deep inside, the broken pieces of his soul began to shift, not disappearing, not fully healed, but forming into something new, something stronger, something that might, one day, be enough to remind the world of hope. Weeks passed, and Ethan moved through them with quiet purpose. He had not returned to the library. The keeper had not appeared again. Yet her words lived within him like a flame that refused to die. He had grown used to the small miracles, helping strangers, listening to those in pain, offering pieces of himself he never thought valuable. Each time he did, he felt lighter, as though shedding a burden he hadn't realized he carried. But the world had a way of testing convictions. It began on a cold evening in November. The city, alive with its usual thrum of traffic and neon light, was suddenly swallowed by darkness. One moment, the skyline glittered like a crown of stars. The next, every light blinked out in unison, leaving behind a suffocating void. The blackout. At first there was only stunned silence. Then came the panic. Car alarms wailed as power failed across blocks. Elevators stalled, trapping people inside. Crowds spilled into the streets, voices rising in confusion and fear. Parents clutched their children. Shops locked their doors. Somewhere in the distance, a window shattered, followed by frantic shouts. Fear spread quickly, faster than the darkness itself. Ethan found himself caught in the middle of a crowded street, the press of bodies around him tightening like a vice. He could hear fragments of terror all around. They say it's an attack. What if the power never comes back? We're not safe here. We're not safe anywhere. The words cut through him, sharp and frantic. He felt the weight of their fear pressing against his own ribs, threatening to suffocate him. For a moment, the old Ethan, the broken Ethan, wanted to retreat, to let the chaos swallow him along with everyone else. But then he remembered, when the world forgets its light, you will remind them of hope. The words rang inside him like a bell. He drew a shaky breath, forcing himself to rise above the storm. His heart thundered in his chest, but his voice, when it came, was steady, clear, and louder than he thought possible. "Don't be afraid," Ethan shouted, his words cutting through the chaos. Dozens of faces turned toward him, their eyes wide, their fear raw. He felt their attention, their desperation, and he pressed forward. "We are not alone. Listen to me. We carry the light within us." For a heartbeat, silence followed. The crowd hung in suspension, waiting. Then something began to shift. A woman, clutching her son, looked up at Ethan's face and found calm in it. Her trembling stilled. She reached for the hand of the stranger beside her. That stranger, in turn, reached for another. Hands began linking across the street. People drew closer instead of pulling apart. Murmurs of reassurance spread, soft but powerful. "It's going to be okay. We'll get through this together." Where moments ago there had been chaos, now there was connection. Fear loosened its grip. Ethan stood at the center, not as a leader, not as a savior, but as a reminder. He looked into the eyes of those around him, people who had forgotten their own strength, and saw the spark returning. Children stopped crying. A man who had been shouting in anger lowered his voice and offered his jacket to an elderly woman shivering in the cold. Neighbors who had never spoken before began talking, sharing, steadying each other. The blackout had stolen the city's light. But here, in the heart of the darkness, another light flickered to life, not from the buildings, but from the people themselves. And Ethan understood. The message had not been a promise of power or greatness. It had not been about changing the world with a single act. It was about this, standing in the darkness and reminding others that the light had never truly been lost. He felt tears sting his eyes as he raised his voice once more, softer this time, but filled with certainty. "We are the light," he whispered. "As long as we remember that the darkness cannot win." The crowd seemed to breathe as one. And for the first time in his life, Ethan knew, deep, unshakably, that the message had reached him exactly when he needed it most. So he could become the message for others.